Hello, namaste. This is Tim Halloran. I'm an astrologer here in Savannah, Georgia, and this is a weekly astrological forecast. I put these videos on YouTube once a week, and you can help support future videos by purchasing a reading from me at the link below. Today is Tuesday, November 4th. We've got our moon in Aries today. And this Thursday, November 6th, we're going to have a full moon in Taurus, approximately 5:23 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, this full moon in Taurus is one of my favorite full moons of the year. The full moon always represents this polarity, this duality, this tension that exists between the opposition of the sun and the moon that creates the sun. The moon being wholly illuminated, okay? So there's always this duality, this polarity and tension. In this case, it's between Taurus and Scorpio, which means that this polarity has to do with simplicity and complication, security and chaos, and the inner world and the outer world, okay? So this full moon is oftentimes celebrated as the enlightenment of the Buddha as well, which is very interesting because, the highest octave of Taurus is this self-security, this inner knowing, this peace and tranquility. And on the other end, Scorpio represents self-mastery, transcendence, austerity, evolution through all these different cycles of nature, so on and so forth. So it's very appropriate that this full moon represents the enlightenment of the Buddha. And it is interesting to note that the Buddha does represent this Taurian energy so much, this very slow and simple and earthy energy. Basically what the Buddha did is he took the religion of Hinduism and stripped it down to its bare bones, okay? Got rid of the complexity and this kind of murkiness and this, chaos that was taking place in the name of religion. And he transformed it into being very simple, needing less ritual, needing less animal sacrifice, and so many things. Okay, so we can sort of see the Taurian energy represented in monastic life. The Taurus energy is the Hierophant, possessing this inner security and wisdom, okay, and also being, considerably monastic, slow. We envision the Zen Buddhist monks. I think of Thich Nhat Hanh, a great, inspiring fountainhead of compassion. But, his method and his energy and his way of doing things is very much, breathing in, I smile. Breathing out, I am grateful. And these very slow walking meditations, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, and doing the japa beads in meditation, okay, and putting a berry underneath the tongue and meditating on the berry, and I appreciate this berry, and this berry is so flavorful. And it's kind of funny because so many of us will attempt to emulate this monastic Zen energy, even though we are not Zen Buddhist monks. So we may try to strive for these very simplistic and kind of bare bone meditative practices and ideologies and these kind of things. Although it may be very difficult for us to do because we are not living in the Zen monastery. In the olden days, the monks would acquire their food and their shelter through begging, okay, from going place to place. There was no need to do these kind of other performances. There was no need to have a different job. Your job was to simply be a monk and to do these things all day long. So it's very interesting that we have this polarity between Taurus and Scorpio, which represents the other, represents complication, karma, depth, emotional trauma, and these types of things, okay? Now, it's funny because so many people, when they consult astrologers, they do it from this very, when am I going to find my next job? When am I going to find my next relationship? I typically never answer these questions bluntly because I don't know, because it requires a deeper looking into these different parts of the self, okay? We have to look at our own self-security. We have to look at our own self-mastery. Okay, if we do not have any self-security or self-mastery, can we really assume that we are ready for a relationship? Okay, do we really want a job to replace, okay, what is left vacant of security and mastery? Okay, so I oftentimes take these questions and turn them in on themselves, and we begin to look at ourselves and our blockages and our insecurities and these kind of things, because removing our insecurities and our blockages is the means to acquiring the job and the relationship that we actually desire, that's actually going to make us feel satisfied, rather than acquiring these things out of lack or out of insecurity, in which case we can only expect to find more fear, more paranoia, more insecurity, and things dwindle and things get tough as we consult the real deeper aspects that do exist, such as karma, such as complication, emotional messiness, and these types of things. So much as we may like to be the Zen Buddhist monk living in the world and meditating on a rock and having our rice meals and just staring at the clouds and these kind of things, and simultaneously it's so important that we do take time for this self-reflection, okay, and this stability inwardly. It's just not practical to expect our lives to actually carry out this way without interacting with other people, without finding, discovering these karmic connections to others. And things do get a little bit more messy and complicated and busy and layers of things, yes? This Mars-Pluto conjunction that's forming the next week is making things very, very busy. And we've got this kind of extra area of Capricorn energy combined with this full moon that's not only making this about inward and outward security, but also a little bit about the past and the future and the old male-dominant world and a future world that's going to be reincorporating feminine aspects and feminine energy and feminine understanding. So there is this tension that can exist in the busyness, in the drama, in so much work to do, in so many connections to so many people that can be represented with this Pluto, Mars, and Venus, Saturn. I mean, it just so happens that this next weekend, you know, we've got the moon in Gemini, we've got Venus squaring to Jupiter. It's like this ball that we've been planning for so many months, this grand feast with all of our friends. We've been putting in all this work for this weekend. It just so happens to be the same time that we received a job promotion, and now we have an additional 10 hours of work we have to put in. That's the same time that our cousins' kids need to be babysat, and there's all of these influences and outer things that are playing into this as we are actively trying to seek our own self-security, okay, oftentimes done through reaching on the outside, making sure that our assets are in order, making sure that there's money in the bank account, fuel in the gas tank, food in the cabinet, and these types of things that are typical of a highly Taurus and Capricorn-like energy, okay? And simultaneously, we have all this Scorpio stuff, okay? This karma, this entanglement with relationships, so on and so forth. And I think that's why I like this full moon so much, is it's really like, can you do it? Like, this is the big questionment. So you want to be enlightened, you know, so you want to be the spiritual being. Can you do it? Can you find your inner sanctuary, your own self-security, and simultaneously be able to balance that with your karmic duties with other people, with your personal relationships, with your family, with your friends? You know, the current time is really just not as simple as it used to be. I mean, in the olden days, when you were a shoemaker, you went to your job and you fixed up shoes all day. If you were a baker, you stuck bread in ovens all day, okay? And it's different than it was then, you know? It used to be a very simple, you know, mechanical process in order to get abundance, in order to sell your goods, and it was very meditative and breathing in and breathing out and this kind of thing. And now it's much more busy and much more hectic, and there's so many more layers of things that people are getting involved with. And so much for technology taking care of everything, because now we just have all of these more levels and levels of interaction and shit and complication. I mean, it just isn't so simple anymore. And I would love if I could offer astrology readings for free the way it was done in the olden days. You know, you could be a priest or be an energy healer or a medicine woman in the olden days, and you would trade and barter those skills for different skills. You know, oddly, I still hear from people that, you know, I don't think Reiki and, you know, astrology and these different spiritual services, these people shouldn't be charging money. And it's just like, hello, you have to keep up with the times. Do you want your Reiki energy healer to be starving? You know, is that really any less of a job than when you go get a massage or when you buy food or purchase anything from anybody? When there is time and energy being used, it has to be taken in for consideration. We all have to balance all of these different things that are going on, you know? And the other interesting thing is since we're talking about Capricorn energy, it's like, do we actually put our time and energy into what we want to be doing? You know, it's like we have all these busy things going on with relationship. Oh, I have to watch the kids on this day. And isn't it interesting that, you know, on a deep level, would I rather be watching the kids than going to work? Yes. I would much rather spend time with the people that are important in my life with these relationships. However, due to insecurity, I have obligations with other people. I have to attend to my job. The boss will think that this looks bad. And you know what? That goes up higher on the ladder of obligations. That's more important. I need to look better for the boss than I do for my family or my kids. Otherwise, how am I going to get security? I'm going to lose that job, you know? So we have these priorities, and these priorities are oftentimes not even what we like. Okay, so there can be quite a bit of frustration going on these next 2 weeks, you know, as we confront this duality of the inner and outer world and kind of the ideal Garden of Eden within us that, you know, this world could be simple if we took things back a notch, you know. Like we talked about in the report last week, you know, if you can plant one seed in the ground, you can get hundreds of thousands of more seeds, and then you plant those. I mean, there is abundance here, and it's really not that complicated. But in the current world that we inhabit in contemporary society, there's all these duties, there's all these obligations, okay? And certainly it is complicated with relationships now. You don't just marry someone because that's what is expected to do in order to foster a family. And it was another thing that came out of security was relationships in the past. And now relationships are opening up into all these new facets. There's all these different reasons that people can be in relationships with one another. And it doesn't necessarily have to incorporate marriage anymore and all this and all this. And it's, again, becoming enormously complicated. And there's so many layers, and it's like, I don't always know where to put my energy. I don't always know what's better or worse for my highest soul intention. How do I balance out my inner world and serenity? How can I acquire some peace of mind for myself? That way I can go out into the world and not lose it and go crazy and start beating everybody up and pulling my hair out and these kind of things. It's a very interesting balance. So it is kind of funny to note how so many people are emulating the Zen Buddhist thing, and yet we have these jobs, we live the American lifestyle, and these types of things. We still go to the movies, we still play video games, we still go to the bar, so many of us, and these types of things. So it's like, how do we find this balance of living in these two very opposing seeming worlds? You know, the world of Scorpio, where everything's disintegrating, becoming complicated because there's more and more and more levels of conspiracy. You know, when we think we have one thing figured out, it turns out that it's more complicated than that because someone was laundering money, because we've got all this crazy stuff going on. You know, we've got voting day is today, and there's all this security that's reliant on the government. We have all this security that's reliant on money. I mean, money in today's world more so represents insecurity than security. People who make their own security dependent on money are more likely to be insecure. So irrelevant of the amount of digits in your bank account, it has nothing to do with your security or not. Just think about Thich Nhat Hanh. How much money does he have? He doesn't even see money, right? People who used to live in the olden days and they would just do their job and not have to see money, oftentimes were a lot more secure because it was simple, it was easy, it was just do this one thing every day and that's your life. And because of that, it was probably a lot easier to focus on your family and these types of things because there was less loose ends hanging around and there wasn't so many people to talk to and so much busyness and all these types of stuff. And how do we find this balance between inner and outer, you know, serenity and outer chaos? I mean, and it also incorporates the past and the future. How do we resolve the past and move towards the future? And it's really not an easy, clear, given thing to answer. I mean, Mars conjunct Pluto and Capricorn, these are like deep desires, all right? Inescapable desires. Both these planets rule desires. And being in Capricorn, these are old desires. These are ancient desires. These are desires that go in us very, very deep into so many past lifetimes where we have wanted that security. We have wanted that little house on the prairie and that family, okay, and that sanctuary and that solitude and that simplicity and that happiness where we can just get up and go to the apple tree and pick an apple and lay back and look at the clouds. This kind of heaven-like Garden of Eden reality that each of us is seeking all the time. Okay, and yet we have been told, how do we acquire this and the means to do this? You know, go out and vote for a representative who will be able to carry the population there. Or go and work for the company that provides you with the assets and therefore the material goods in order to be fulfilled and secure. Because everybody knows that nothing is more fulfilling than watching a hockey game and drinking beer on the widescreen television and these types of things. You know, we have been so drawn out of our own inner security, and it's really been sucking the life out of us and forcing us to focus on this job, that thing, busy, 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 and the more you work, the more money you make, so the more you work, the more secure you are, and it's just not true. The more you are overloaded with stress and these types of things, obviously this is killing us a little bit on the inside. And these 2 weeks is like, this is a time we can see all this stuff coming in, and it's very complicated, and we're balancing the emotional debate with our partner with the overload and the overtime of work that's coming in and these types of things. And it's just like, I don't have time for myself anymore, okay? So how do we balance this out? Is we need to figure out this inner feminine world. We need to figure out how to have this sanctuary within, even though we are within chaos on the outside. And it is very ancient how we find that security. It's still doing it the old way, the way that has been done for millennia, for ancient ages. I mean, it's the ancients that have this wisdom that has become lost. So there is something to be taken from Thich Nhat Hanh and the Zen Buddhists. And we can do this simple, repetitive mantra in our head, perhaps, while we're busy with all of the work and busy in the relationship debate and this types of thing. Because we have to have some ground to stand on internally, okay? And as long as this mantra is going on in my head, yeah, all this stuff is going on the outside, but you know what? I've acquired some spaciousness, okay? And this is what the Zen people are all about. It's all about spaciousness. It's about emptiness, okay? It's about steady mindfulness, right? And that means that we have to slow down. We have to be patient. We have to be grounded. We have to be practical. Okay, maybe instead of doing a whole bunch of overnighters this week and just busting out our 4 jobs of work, all right, because you know what, that could make us get so stressed we'll get sick, and that's going to put us behind. All right, maybe just keep up with the sleep schedule. Do some repetitive things every day. Every day, make a little ritual for yourself. This is when I'm going to go out and sit by my tree. This is when I'm going to go out by my garden. It doesn't have to take a long time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. We don't give ourselves this time anymore. The really, really busy people don't give themselves 5 minutes to do something simple and relaxing. I don't have time to meditate. I don't have time for this nonsensical repeating of a mantra. Who has time for that? And you know what? The nice thing about the invention of the mantra, which we're going to say is a very old invention, is that you can do it simultaneously with all this stuff that's going on the outside, can't we? That's the whole point of doing these very simple mindfulness practices, is it's giving us a way to actually implement this into the currently chaotic and complicated life that we live in, right? We can just be walking down the street and automatically, because of practice, we just start doing our walking meditation without just speeding down the street and everything is machine washing in my head. I got an appointment at 8 o'clock, I've got an appointment at 10 o'clock, then I have to meet this person tomorrow, and blah, 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 blah. We have to give ourselves the opportunity to let these things go. We have to give ourselves the opportunity to appreciate the simplicity and the abundance that is still here. It is just oftentimes overlooked, okay? And thus we end up feeling stressed, and then we get sick, and then we develop these mental disorders. I mean, we can solve all these things through a very simple means, okay? And simultaneously, we do have to keep in mind the flip side of things, okay? For all the hierophants out there that would rather just escape into the monastery and not confront reality. We do, on the other hand, have these relationships, and these relationships form because of karmic arrangements. That means me and you have work to do together, all right? I'm helping you, assisting you, by bringing your emotions into the light. I'm presenting you with your own insecurity, you see? This relationship squabble and this tension and stress that we can be feeling, well, we're making it more apparent to one another. That way we can move through it. That way we are actually helping each other transcend, become masters of ourselves, okay? And oftentimes the reflections is a great means of doing that, but we do oftentimes point out our own shortfallings, and we also say, you know what, that's not the best you can do. You know what? That's not who you truly are. And of course, these are hard things to hear, and we oftentimes get very defensive and kind of attack and get, mean about it. But at the same time, if we didn't have these reflections, it is true that we're not always who we are. We're not always acting to the best that we can. And we do need to be reminded of that frequently. That way we can make these adjustments, okay? We're not being the best that we can be when we're flattening and we're trampling and we're, totally ignoring our own needs. We have to pamper ourselves too. We have to find this balance of nurturing within ourselves in order to do the best outward work. If you're just going to bust ass and do work constantly, you're going to start falling down. If you start cutting out sleep and doing what the college kids do, and then they transition into the job and they do the exact same things. And that's what's funny, is that seen as like, oh, you've made it, congratulations. Now you're working 12 hours a day and you don't sleep anymore. It must be great to be a professional, You're not going to be able to keep up with that. And, so many people do end up crashing and falling down and having to change at a fundamental level the structure that they formed for themselves. Because this structure was based on the insecurity that I need more work, therefore I need more money, therefore I need to load up my life with more obligations. And I'm suppressing my own inner feminine nature for empathy and nurturance and softness and warmth. Okay, so this is a time period, these 2 weeks, of attempting to seek the balance between the hard, cold obligations of the other, of the outside world, of chaos, and the inner need to find space, solitude, and sanctuary. And yes, we will be discovering the conflicts and the blockages that do prevent this balance from happening, okay? Which is a means for us discovering how we can sort of adjust something over here, Sometimes all it takes is something very, very simple for those weights to swing and for us to find that balance, okay? So don't lose hope, even though we can be confronting these things. See it as an opportunity to achieve self-security and self-mastery. And do keep in mind the words of the Buddha, that even though everything can appear as suffering on the outside, and there's so many complications and duties and work that we are in many ways bonded to, simultaneously we are always free of that when we remember our true nature within, okay? So balance all this crazy, complicated, Iron Age, really far out and complicated nature that doesn't even seem like nature anymore, where we have computer screens and cities and skyscrapers. Balance that out with the essential, simple, always remaining true and steady nature. Breathe in, breathe out. So much love to you and your beloveds. Namaste.